In this video, we're going to look at finding the range of possible lengths for a triangle when given two sides. Notice on this triangle right here, we have two sides. One is 20, one is 22. And then there's a side that we don't have a value. So to figure that out, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create three inequalities. Now, one inequality right off the bat, we're not going to be able to use because it's going to give us a negative value. Notice I have a note here, and it says, remember that you cannot have negative values. So no negative values are allowed. So as soon as you create an inequality and you realize it's going to give you a negative value when you solve for x, you want to go ahead and eliminate that one. And then the other two are going to give you positive values, and those two will be what we use to find what it must be greater than and what it must be less than. So how long this side can be, right? What's the biggest it can be and what's the smallest it can be. So let me go ahead and move this up just a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and start writing what I know. So for this first one, I know that I have 20 on one side, so I'm going to put 20. And then I have 22 on the other side, so we'll put 22. And I know that those two sides together must be greater than x. So from this point, I'm going to go ahead and combine them. So 20 plus 22 gives me 44. So I have 44 is greater than x. So this is going to be part of my inequality. So now let's go ahead and create the next scenario. So then we could also say that 20 plus x is greater than 22. So in order to solve this, I'll go ahead and subtract 20 from both sides of the inequality. In other words, both sides of this symbol right here, our inequality symbol. That cancels. And I end up with, once I bring this down, x is going to be greater than 2. And we'll use this as one of our values. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the third one because I want you to see what it would look like when you have one that you're not going to use to describe the range. So I'm going to go ahead and put 22 on this side, right? We had 20 plus 22, 20 plus x. And now I'm going to do 22 plus x. And it too will be greater than 20. Now when I do this one and I subtract 22 on both sides, notice it leaves me with a negative 2. So this one we will not use, right? Because we cannot have a negative value. So no negative values. So now we're going to write a range from this. So I'm going to go up here. So looking up on top, notice we says x must be less than. Okay, so I'm going to move this back up. And notice if I were to flip this around right here, and I'm just going to flip it around to put the x on the left, x, the little pointy end goes towards the x, must be less than 44. So that's the one we're going to use there. So I'm going to go back up. X must be less than 44 units. And then if I look back down here, x must be greater than 2. So x must be greater than 2. Now notice this x, right, is in the opening, facing towards the opening of this inequality. In other words, x, right, is going to be greater than whatever value we put here. And then x is going to be less than whatever value we put on the right. So my x had to be greater than the 2, so I'm going to put a 2. Or another way you could look at it is like when we taught you domain and range and we had you write these inequalities, we'd always tell you to put the lesser value on the left-hand side and then put the greater value on the right. X is going to be less than 44. And now we have written an inequality which represents the range of the possible lengths for the triangle. So just notice x has to be greater than 2. We're looking at it from that way. And x has to be less than 44. We're looking at it from that way. And this is your answer.